Hello, and thank you for joining me again today on the Finding Hope After Loss podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more loss and infertility families. Next week, I will be starting back up with the Business and Organization Spotlight. If you have a business or organization that was either started by a lost parent or one that helps people in the lost community, feel free to reach out to get more information on being featured. You can email me at sarah@journeyforjasmine.com or reach out to me on any of my social media at Journey for Jasmine. Today, I am talking with Jennifer Edmonds, who is a yoga and meditation teacher focusing on women's health. She had a long fertility journey herself, including dealing with being advanced maternal age, going through several rounds of IVF, and having a miscarriage at 8 weeks. She then turned to fertility yoga and was able to get pregnant naturally with her son. She now has 2 living children and teaches fertility yoga to other women who are struggling with their hormones and their cycles.
Hello, everyone. Today I am here with Jennifer Edmonds. Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Definitely. Sarah, thank you so much for having me here. And I've followed you for a while, and it's just really lovely to connect with you. So thank you. So for those that don't know me, my name is Jen. I am a yoga and meditation teacher, and I specialize in working in women's health and fertility. And I also have a long fertility and loss journey of my own. So I think that all plays a big part in the work that I do. And it's my job now to help women who are going through a similar process. So whether it's, the infertility journey or treatments or those who are navigating loss, I am able to just provide tools to make the journey that little bit easier. So that's what brings us here today.
Well, I've been following you for a while too, and I was I was attracted to your stuff originally because I just love the sense of humor that you put into a lot of what you do.
I feel like if we don't laugh sometimes on this journey, we'll just be crying all the time. So it's
I
really
agree.
important.
I know. I feel like every time I watch one, I'm like, it makes me like laugh out loud, actually. And I'm like, this is, and I agree. Like, it's so nice because this space can be really, really heavy sometimes. And I think you're right that we have to laugh at ourselves and at our situations sometimes, even though circumstances are not always great.
No, they're absolutely like it's anything but funny. Heavy is the word when it comes to talking about loss and infertility. And yeah, we need some little breaks in that occasionally.
So do you mind sharing just a little bit about your journey?
Definitely. So I got married when I was 33, and we were very keen to start trying for a family pretty soon after that. And we were, relatively young. We didn't have any health issues. We had no reason to think that we'd have trouble conceiving. So I went off birth control and my period never returned. And, I went back to my doctor after about 6 months and she said, look, don't worry too much. Sometimes it can just take a little bit longer for some women. Just keep waiting. So we did. We kept waiting and waiting. And after about 12 months, there was no sign of my cycle starting again. I started seeing a Chinese medicine doctor, perhaps going down the natural fertility route of things, but nothing seemed to work. So eventually we were referred to a fertility specialist who ran a few tests and told me at the age of 34 that I had likely gone through early menopause. And that was kind of the case for me. So, not the thing that you want to hear when you haven't even really had a chance to try for a baby. So they agreed to try a few different treatments. So we started off with Clomid to try and get me to ovulate, but it didn't work. So obviously I didn't ovulate. Nothing seemed to change or happen. So my doctor's suggestion was we go straight into IVF. That was our only option. So we were pretty disappointed. We'd had friends that had gone through IVF and it looked awful. But when you get to that point, you're kind of also in this boat where you think, at least that's the thing that will get me pregnant. I'm finally at that point. Nothing else has worked. I'll go through IVF and we'll just finally have our baby and we'll move on. So we started our cycle, and I was on really high dose medication. So the injections were really, really high dose, which of course made me quite crazy. And after 2 weeks, they kept upping my dose and upping my dose. My body didn't respond at all. So that cycle was cancelled because there were no eggs available to collect. And that was a pretty dark moment because we were then left with the possibility that IVF wasn't even going to be an option for us. But I just, in the back of your mind, sometimes you think that just doesn't resonate with me. I don't feel like that's my path. I was living overseas during this time. We had moved to Southeast Asia soon after we got married. And I had had a few friends back in Australia, in Sydney, where I was from, who'd had success with a particular doctor. So we connected with her and we decided to fly back to Australia and try again. And this doctor was a lot more positive. She'd looked at all my results and my protocol for my first cycle, and she'd said, I think we can change a few things up and make it a little bit of a difference here. So I thought, all right, well, we'll give it a go. And thankfully, this cycle actually went quite well. We ended up with one little embryo and it was untested. We did a fresh transfer and lo and behold, it worked. And that was my daughter, who's nearly 6. So that was my first fertility journey. But my husband and I are only children, and we had always known that we wanted to have 2 kids. Well, 10 if, I'd be really, really lucky and honest here, but no, we wanted to complete our family. So when my daughter was about 1, I stopped breastfeeding and the most ridiculous thing happened. My period started again. My cycle just kicked back into gear and oh my goodness, we were over the moon. We were so excited and we thought this was the one thing we had missing the first time. We're going to start trying again straight away. And wasn't quite the easy journey the second time around that we hoped to. We ended up with a whole bunch of new issues that weren't there before. We tried naturally for about 6 months. And after nothing happened, I was about 37 by this stage. We went to a new fertility doctor and she said, look, I'll run a few tests, but just keep trying. Anyway, my test came back. We found out my AMH levels were close to 0. I had developed a thyroid condition, so I was medicated for that. My progesterone levels were very, very low to the point that they probably couldn't support a pregnancy. And we found out my fallopian tubes were partially blocked. And on top of all of that, my husband's results came back a little kind of below average as well. So coupled with all of that, she agreed to put me on letrozole for a few months and just try to give me progesterone to support my cycle. So we did that and nothing worked. So we were referred, excuse me, straight back to IVF. And again, we were so disappointed. And we thought, look, if it was the thing that worked last time, let's just do it, complete our family and move on. So I was kind of relieved to go through IVF again. And this was at the start of 2020. And we had one of those cycles that was perfect on paper. My hormone levels were amazing. We got 2 perfect little embryos. My lining was perfect. My hormone levels just were great the whole cycle. And so we transferred both. And sadly, they didn't stick. And then by the time we'd gotten to those transfers, it was March of 2020. And then the next day we went into lockdown over COVID. So my fertility treatment journey ended there. And we were in this space where I'm sure anyone who was going through this in 2020 knows that, infertility treatments were considered non-essential surgeries. So we had no idea when they would be available again. So we thought that was kind of it. And, we were, secondary infertility is this difficult space to sit in because, you are so grateful for this beautiful little child that you have, but at the same time, there's so much shame and guilt with wanting more. And we just didn't feel like our journey had come to the end that we wanted. So anyway, we moved on with our lives. And it was around this time that a colleague that I used to work with said to me, I don't know if you're interested, but I have a friend who teaches fertility yoga. Do you want to give it a go? And I thought, no, not really. I've just been through IVF. Like, what is a bit of yoga going to do? And at this stage, I had been a Pilates teacher for about 12 years. And I worked in clinical Pilates, a lot of kind of exercise science focused work. I wasn't really into yoga. I didn't really get it. I thought it was a lot of lying down. I found it very boring. I didn't understand why people really liked it so much. But I thought, look, we're in lockdown. I've got nothing else to do. I've literally tried everything else. Why not? So I started practicing with this wonderful woman who is from Australia who she gave me just these beautiful, gentle practices to work alongside my cycle. And it was the one thing that I hadn't done throughout my whole journey, which was just stop, just for a moment, take a breath and just ask my body what it wanted and what I needed. And after a couple of months, I started noticing these little changes in my life. I had developed chronic insomnia when I was going through IVF, and that had continued. But after a couple of months of a regular yoga practice, it started to disappear, and I just would fall asleep at night, which was life-changing. For anyone who's been through bouts of insomnia knows it's really debilitating. I noticed I would be just a bit happier. I'd be nicer to my husband. I'd be, more willing to kind of make plans with people, as much as you could during COVID. And I just sort of found it easier to be present with my daughter as well, which was really hard. And then bigger things started to happen. My thyroid condition started to heal, and I hadn't changed anything else. I hadn't changed my medication, but every time I went for testing, my results would get a little bit better. And then in July of that year, I fell pregnant naturally. And this was mind blowing because, it wasn't something that had ever happened. And I had so many cycles previously that should have worked that didn't, but somehow I had fallen pregnant on my own. We were over the moon. So we went to the doctor, we got the pregnancy confirmed, all my hormone levels are rising, things were looking great. But sadly, we lost that baby at 8 weeks. So don't get me wrong, this was a really hard time. And anyone who's been through loss knows it changes you. And you can even hear in my voice now, years later, like all the emotion is still there, of course, as you well know, Sarah. But it also gave me this feeling of trust and capability that wasn't there before. And I realized I had stumbled upon something that no doctor had told me about. I had done something that no doctor had told me was possible. And the only thing I had changed in my life was start practicing yoga, of all of the things in the world. So I wanted to know why. How had this practice had such an incredible impact on my life and my body? So I retrained as a yoga teacher. I started studying all of the practices. I went in depth into my 500-hour teacher training practices. And then I found a wonderful school that specialized in fertility training. And so I dove into all of that and just started employing all of it into my life and just sort of seeing where it went. And then at the very end of 2020, I fell pregnant again. And that little boy is 2. So that is my journey. And that's what brings me to this conversation today and the work that I do, because I just feel that there is another way to support yourself throughout this process. And I want as many women to know about it as possible.
Thank you for sharing all that with us. I know you definitely had a long journey there with lots of ups and downs.
We all have.
And I feel like, people think that, or I know people going through IVF don't think it, but, a lot of people who don't think that IVF is like a guarantee. Like you do IVF and you get your baby. And that's, as so many people know, like that's not how it happens at all.
So true. And it works less often than it doesn't work, which we don't want to hear. And they don't really make that very clear.
Yeah. And I mean, and it's expensive and it's emotionally draining, physically draining. I mean, it's just all around like nobody wants to go through IVF.
No, absolutely. It is all of those things that no one tells you.
And so I know that you were also older when you were trying to get pregnant. I was 35 during my last pregnancy. So yeah, I was treated as the advanced maternal age and all of that. Did you ever get any pushback because of age or anything
Oh,
like that?
goodness, yes. Oh, like the moment you turn 35, it's like, right, you're old. And it's all this awful terminology we use. Like even a woman who's pregnant from the age of 35 onwards is referred to having a geriatric pregnancy. I mean, who came up with this terminology? It's really damaging. I was told by several fertility doctors that my best option was just to go for donor eggs. That was, why bother? Why even try with your own eggs? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that path, but For me, it just didn't resonate. I knew that that wasn't where I was at. And I just had this feeling that I was more capable than doctors believed and had faith in me. So, yes, I think, and it went hand in hand with secondary infertility because obviously I experienced fertility struggles for both of my pregnancies. And I just found the reaction the second time around really confronting. It was sort of this attitude of, well, you've already got a child. You're a bit older now, so obviously things are so much harder. Why are you bothering? Why are you going through all of this again? Just be happy with what you've got, move on. And that isn't how it works. And,
Yeah.
I have a lot of students who are in that same boat of secondary infertility, and it doesn't help to say, why are you bothering? It just doesn't work that way. So yes, I think that we are faced with all sorts of pushback from doctors and society when we are older. But if you know in your body and your heart that, what you want is a baby or another baby, I don't think you should let age be the reason to not try.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I saw that term everywhere during my pregnancy, the geriatric pregnancy, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, it makes me sound like I'm 80 with a cane, like trying to get pregnant." Like, I mean, no, that's not like what it is at all. I feel young. Why are you making me feel old?
Oh my goodness, it's insane. So agree.
And I feel like people too now are having babies older. There's a lot more that are waiting for, whatever reason and are successfully having babies. And I think as long as you're able to take care of your baby and want your baby, like why can you not have one? Why can you not try for one? Just because a doctor
Exactly.
set some arbitrary like limit.
I know. It's crazy. And yes, we know that studies show us that it can take longer to conceive as you're older, but it doesn't mean it's not possible. I think that's what we need to remember.
I actually had somebody on the podcast, a recent episode. She was 50. And she went
Wow.
through IVF and had a baby because she just felt like this is something I needed to do or that she needed to do. And I mean, yeah, it's
Wow.
possible. I mean, I know there's not
It
a lot of
is.
people that are 50 and wanting to have a baby, but just putting it out there, that you
Exactly.
don't have to
Wow.
stop at 35.
Exactly. Definitely.
So are there any things that you found that helped you through your grief of going through the infertility and the loss?
Grief is a big one, isn't it? And obviously you are well in touch with grief. And I think that the thing that helped me was that, grief can't exist without love being there first. And it's kind of got this bittersweetness to it. And, that doesn't make things easier, but it makes them more manageable, I found. When so there's so much about the journey of especially struggling to conceive, where it just feels so shameful. There's like, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with my body? Why can everyone else do this? It's the one thing I'm designed to do. Why can't I do this? So shame comes into it a lot. And that's a really hard emotion to deal with because, it comes down to your self-worth and triggers so much of perhaps what you went through as a child and growing up and a lot of just little traumas that come up along the way. But then grief is it's so much bigger than everything else. And I think when you go through loss and repeated loss, and the journey of infertility is loss as well, when you lose embryos, when you lose all of these little chances along the way, like they add up so much. So the things that helped me through it were just being able to have space to sit in that space of grief and just having people around me that recognized it and said, it's okay that you're feeling this way. I think there's a lot of expectations that, when you lose a pregnancy early on or you go through a round of IVF that isn't successful, it's kind of this like, well, why are you so upset? It wasn't a baby, you didn't hold your baby in your arms. And that's just not how it works. There's no scale of grief. We think that this is worse than that. But when it comes to trauma and what you've experienced, your brain and your body don't know a scale. Yes, there's always going to be someone who's been through something quote unquote worse than you. But, your body doesn't know that. It only knows what you've been through. So I think when you can just give yourself space to say, it's okay to feel like this. It is okay to be in bed for a few days or a few weeks and just know that some time in the future, the clouds will start to part a little bit and there will be people around you to pull you out of it. I think just giving yourself permission to be with your feelings really helped me. And then these gentle practices that I've learned along the way, things like coming back to your breath, finding ways to connect to your body. And so much of these traumatic experiences relate to our bodies not feeling safe. So, especially the journey of IVF, your body is really taken away from you. We hand over our bodies to these medical professionals and we're put through these procedures and all these injections and all of these things where, your body is no longer your own. So when you can come back to being in touch with how you feel and what your body is feeling, I think that's where you start to reclaim a little bit of possibility and joy in your life again. So that's why I've loved learning about these gentle practices like yoga and breath work and meditation, because they give you all of these tools to come back to your body and to know what you need. So I hope that answers your question. That is a really big one.
It is. And it's, I really like what you said about, your body doesn't have that scale. It doesn't have that comparison. Because, yeah, that's what we do. That's what we just naturally do with people. We compare, like, oh, well, mine, I wasn't very far along. Mine isn't as bad as this one, or they had more losses, or they went through longer infertility, whatever it is. But yeah, we only know what we've been through, and that doesn't mean that it isn't valid.
Absolutely. And it doesn't help you to start the comparison journey. It really doesn't.
Yeah, that's one of the things I don't like in the loss community and infertility community too. Maybe like I didn't have to go through, like I didn't go through IVF, but I still went through fertility treatment. But that doesn't mean that, my experience wasn't hard too, if that makes sense,
Of course. And, I can sit here and say, look, my loss isn't as bad as your loss because I didn't hold my baby, in my arms. I didn't go through, those later stage losses where I think, yes, I think they are worse than early stage losses. But, at the time, your body and your nervous system, they don't understand that. So you can intellectualize it later on, but it really doesn't help you in the moment at all.
Yeah, don't don't fight your
Mm.
feelings.
No.
I've learned that the hard way. Like, don't push them down, don't try to ignore them. Like, that never ends well for me.
Oh, exactly, exactly. Mm.
So I think it's really cool though that you went through all of these things and then the only thing you changed was yoga and and look at all the changes it led to.
It's crazy. I know, and it still blows my mind, and I had seen a lot of fertility doctors, a lot. And, you put your trust in all of them. And when they say, look, I think I was given like a less than 1% chance of, it ever happening naturally for me with all of the problems that we had going on. Yeah, it still blows my mind. And it continues to. I have students that go through so much and then they just change this one little thing and it changes everything.
So what is it? I mean, I don't know like the whole science behind it. I'm sure there's a big long explanation for that, but like is there like a simple kind of
Definitely.
answer of how
There
it
is.
helps?
In terms of the science stuff, there's three main things. So I'll go through the probably the physiological aspects of what yoga does to your body. And I should point out it is one of those alternative or holistic treatments that has been extensively studied in Western medicine because it is linked to having so many benefits to so many different conditions. So I'll touch on that first, but there is more to it than that. So the first thing that we look at is yoga increases circulation and blood flow within the body. And, when you are looking at all different types of health concerns, exercise can improve a lot of them. The health benefits of Exercise on its own are well researched and extensively studied. So we know that, it increases your immune function. It lowers your risk of big diseases like heart disease and type 2 diabetes and all those sorts of things. So yoga fits into that category. But the special thing about what we do in fertility yoga is that while we're increasing circulation within the body, we can bring it to the parts of the body that are really needed to help synchronize your hormones and increase reproductive hormones. So we want to bring blood flow to areas in the brain to help that connection between the pituitary gland, which then tells the reproductive organs what to do. And it also allows us to bring blood flow to the pelvis and hips and really bring all of that nourishing fresh blood to those reproductive organs to where it needs to go. We need to remember that blood is our body's delivery system for nutrients and hormones. So without good circulation, we can't get all of those nutrients and hormones to where they need to go. So what we do is obviously increase the body circulation. It depends on what stage of the cycle in terms of what practices we choose. And that really enhances what we need. The second thing is that it allows you to, this idea of balancing hormones. I don't like the term balancing hormones because your hormones are always in this constant state of flux. They are synchronizing in this little dance at every moment of the day. And I think that that is what we kind of need to work with. So there are so many ways in which yoga can help you synchronize your hormones. And I see it so much. A student will come to me and they'll say something like, I used to have a great 28-day cycle. I'd ovulate in the middle. I would then have a 2-week luteal phase and I'd get my period. My period would be healthy. I wouldn't get any cramps. And then a year into their fertility journey, all of a sudden, their cycle is all over the place. They're ovulating irregularly. They may get really painful periods. They might get spotting here and there before or after their period. I see it so much. And one of the biggest things that impacts your menstrual cycle is the production of cortisol. And that's one of your stress hormones. And when you are in a stressful environment or something stressful happens to you, what happens in your brain is you've got this little gland called the amygdala, which is kind of like the watchtower, the guard. It's constantly looking for any signals of danger or threats to your environment. So when something stressful happens to you, your amygdala goes, okay, this is a stressful circumstance. There's a potential threat. What we need to do is start pumping out our stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, to get ready to fight or flee. This is your fight or flight response. So then what happens is we start pumping out cortisol and adrenaline. And what happens with those hormones is that it takes all of that blood flow and circulation away from your internal organs and it sends it to your extremities, your arms and your legs, and to your lungs. So we get ready to either fight or flee. And in some cases, that freeze response will come where we have to play dead. Now, this is something that happens in a split second. And it's not something that you have automatic control over. Your body has developed over tens of thousands of years. This is a very highly developed response. So all of these processes happen, you've got no control over it. The problem is when you're going through a prolonged period of stress, like infertility, or if you have experienced loss, you are in this constant state of fight or flight for a long period of time. The production of cortisol in particular, when that is pumped out continually over a long period, it starts to interfere with your body's ability to produce progesterone. And we know progesterone is really important for ovulation and, of course, supporting a little embryo. So this is why I see so often students will come to me, their cycle starts to go out of whack because of this massive imbalance of stress hormones versus reproductive hormones. So that is something that yoga is able to assist with. It helps us recognize our stress response. It gives us tools to come out of it more easily and more quickly. And it builds this idea of resilience within our nervous systems. So when we are experiencing stress, and there's no way to remove stress from your life, especially if you're dealing with fertility troubles. So what we can then change is our response. So the beautiful thing is, these students that have these cycles that have gone crazy, once they are able to bring in a gentle, calming practice like yoga or meditation into their lives, we start to see those cycles going back to where they were. We get that regular ovulation, we see that luteal phase starting to lengthen out again, and that's where we can make changes. The third thing that I think yoga does, which is where we move a little bit away from the science and the physiological responses, and we get more into, I like to call it kind of the woo-woo or the more spiritual part of yoga. And that is just your ability to reconnect with your body and to trust your body again. And, this, like I said before, this journey takes you so out of what your body inherently needs. It's, this is what my doctor's telling me. This is what my nutritionist is telling me. I have to do this, that, and the other to my body to make it get pregnant or to carry a pregnancy. But yoga is able to cut out all of that noise and just remind you that you are inherently capable. Your body is designed to reproduce. That's what it wants to do. When it's optimized and when it's sort of functioning at its best state, it is able to conceive a baby. So when you are able to put all of that together, I mean, it makes total sense. The way I saw my thyroid condition start to balance out. And it's so funny, I wish I had a magic wand more than anything in the world. And don't get me wrong, if it was offered to me, I'd probably take it and I could just go, boop, come and do some yoga for a month and you'll be pregnant. Look, I would not say no to that. But what I can absolutely promise people is a practice like this brings you back to what you need on a much bigger scale. Sleep, being able to sleep well is so important. Being able to look forward to things again in your life is so important. And it goes so beyond getting that positive pregnancy test. And that's where I think the magic happens, when we're able to say, I need to do something for myself that isn't just about getting pregnant or having a baby. And that's what really makes a big difference.
Yeah, it is really hard to not get into the whole like focus just on the positive test and getting that baby, and then you don't want to take vacations, you don't want to do anything because what if you get pregnant, or it's like you just put everything on hold for this, and it feels like, well, this may or may not ever happen, but you keep hoping it will, so you keep living your life like that.
Absolutely. And you just go down this rabbit hole and, before you know it, it's taken over every part of your life. It affects your relationship, your friendships, just it takes so much joy. You don't want to go out to social situations with friends that are going to be talking about kids and asking you when you're going to be pregnant. And it affects your health, your physical health, your mental health, your emotional health, and your ability to focus and concentrate at work and plan for the future. Do I go for that promotion because am I going to be pregnant in 6 months? It is endless. And when you get into that crazy spiral and that loop of what if, it takes everything away from you. And it's so, so hard.
So is the fertility yoga like if you're not trying to get pregnant, but you have like problems with your cycles, or like me, you have PCOS or something like that, is it good for those things too?
Amazing question. Yes. So in a perfect world, and this would maybe be like 1% of the students that I see, they come to me because they've got perhaps menstrual irregularities and they want to get pregnant in the future. They're not currently trying to conceive. And the differences we're able to make without that pressure of I need to get pregnant are remarkable. So I should point out first of all here that fertility yoga isn't some like new crazy form of yoga that I've invented. It probably doesn't look different to what you would see in a regular yoga class. But what makes it special is that we can take the phases of the menstrual cycle, so menstruation, the follicular phase, ovulation, and then the luteal phase. We look at what the body needs energetically, hormonally at each phase, and we match the practices accordingly. So, for example, during menstruation, this is a time your body needs to rest. So, we bring a lot of restorative work into our yoga practice. And this looks like lying around on pillows, literally. It is so gentle. It's a lot of breath work, A lot of it might look similar to yin yoga, where we're doing release poses, just creating space in the pelvis, relieving tension away from the lower back, just allowing that beautiful release of blood flow that needs to happen at times of menstruation. Then as we work through the follicular and the ovulatory phases, here's where your energy levels and your hormone levels are increasing. Ovulation is like the peak of your cycle. It's where most of the hormones are at their highest. So that's where we want to see more energetic poses. We'll do more standing work, a lot more of the warrior poses, more like that vinyasa practice where we're moving up and down. And what that does is works with that build of energy. And we want to see things like around ovulation, increased libido, more energy to go out and partake in social interactions. Those sorts of things are good signals that your hormones are doing what they need to do. And then as we get to the luteal phase, we start to slow the practice back down. Again, we want to keep maintaining good circulation and blood flow to, just keep the body functioning optimally, or if you are trying to conceive, to support that growing embryo. But we do tend to scale the practices back because that's where the hormone levels are either dropping or they're getting ready to support a pregnancy. So when we can approach our cycles and match our yoga practice, and not just yoga, but exercise that we're doing, our lifestyles, that's where we start to live in this beautiful cyclical nature that brings so much just connection back to your body. And that's where your hormones can start to kind of synchronize and work beautifully. And I find that if you aren't feeling energetic around ovulation and you're not having much of a libido, that's where we go back to that previous cycle. We look at what we were doing during menstruation or what we were doing during that previous cycle's luteal phase. Were you pushing yourself too much? Were you increasing those stress levels by getting up early, going to the gym, booking 100 different things into your calendar, pushing through all these deadlines at work? If we aren't actively taking moments to rest at those stages, it has a flow-on effect to the next cycle. To get to your question about PCOS, and what I find obviously with a lot of my students with PCOS, they don't have a cycle. So here's where we need to do a couple of things. There's a lot of different reasons why you might not be menstruating regularly with PCOS or for any other forms of amenorrhea. So we need to do two things. The first is get that energy flowing. We need to get that connection going through the brain and the ovaries. So we want a combination of energetic practices that kind of wake that connection back up. But at the same time, we need to remind the body that it is safe, that it is an okay time to ovulate, because your body, if it doesn't feel safe, it is in that kind of stress response, it won't feel like it is a good time to ovulate. So we need to then bring it back to those more restorative practices as well, where we come back to the breath, where we allow time for rest. And that brings that body into a place of what we call rest and digest, that parasympathetic state, where your brain can go, okay, I am in a place where it is safe to perhaps bring about a healthy cycle again. So I hope that answers your question. It really depends on the menstrual irregularity, but that's basically how we work around the cycle and the changes that we can bring about.
Yeah, no, that definitely does answer the question. I was just curious, for people who are trying to, I know you don't like the term, but balance the hormones.
No, it's a really good question because, how many of us growing up had a perfect cycle without any period pain, without any, soreness around our breasts, without any, spotting here, that like no one goes through puberty and, then we're thrown on birth control and where, that cycle's taken away from you. So you don't even recognize your body symptoms anymore. So, when we are working with a natural cycle, it is so important to use your menstrual cycle as kind of a report card. It shows you what's going on within your body at a much deeper level. And that's why it is wonderful to be able to use it as a superpower. Look at your menstrual cycle and go, oh, it's not just this annoying thing I have to deal with every month, but it's something I can work with. It's something that I can give back to my body. And I think whether you're trying to conceive or not, I mean, I'm almost 42 and I'm no longer trying to conceive, but I live in this way. I have a healthier cycle now at the age of 42 than I ever did in, my teens or my 20s or while I was trying to conceive.
Something I definitely wish I had found during
Me
my
too.
journey instead of, going through all the stuff I went through. But
Me too. The differences that would be made in the world. But yeah, that's a conversation for another day.
so if people wanted to find more about you or were interested in working with you, where would be the best place to go for that?
I have a few resources. So I have a podcast too, if people would like to connect and listen to a few more things about fertility yoga. It's called Your Journey to Fertility. I think probably the best way to just learn a bit more about me and connect is through Instagram. My handle is jen.elementpilatesyoga. And I also have a website as well where you can go and have a look at the fertility course that I have available, which just is pretty much the most comprehensive yoga for menstrual health and fertility course that you'll find. It gives you practices through each phase of your cycle, works you through basically every day of your cycle. And it goes a little deeper as well if you are going through fertility treatments like IUI and IVF. It gives you practices to do at each day of those cycles as well. So I'll give you links to all of those.
That sounds great. And I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all of this great information. I definitely learned so much already.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you for sharing everything that you do as well. I think it's really important, the work that we do and the things that we share to help people feel like they are definitely not alone on this journey. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for sharing your story with us and for sharing more about how fertility yoga works. It really does seem crazy sometimes when we've tried literally everything and decide, okay, I've tried everything else. Let's just give this last thing a try. And then that turns out to be the thing that actually makes a difference for you. That was actually acupuncture for me. I had heard it was helpful for regulating cycles, especially with PCOS, but thought there's no way that just sticking a few needles in would actually help. And then I actually did it, and lo and behold, my cycles regulated. I think sometimes the more, quote, natural things can be overlooked because either we don't know enough about them, we don't hear about them and know that they're even an option, or we think that they may take too long to work. When we're dealing with infertility and loss, we just want to be pregnant as fast as possible. Just give us a medicine that will make it happen quickly. Diet and exercise changes are incredibly effective in some cases, but we don't always see those results right away. This can make us feel like things aren't working and makes it hard to stick with it. That was the case for me, anyways. I didn't want to take the time to make the changes. I just wanted to do the fertility treatment that would get me pregnant quickly. But now looking back, I wish I had at least given the diet a chance because I think it could have helped. And there's definitely nothing that says you can't do both things at once. You can still work on eating better, exercising more, making these small changes while going through the fertility treatment. It doesn't have to be one or the other. Are you like this too? Are you patient and willing to wait to see results? Or are you more impatient and just wanting to get that positive pregnancy test as fast as you can? Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. If you like the show, please leave a review or rating on Apple or Spotify. It only takes a moment and really helps the show reach more lost and infertility families. Thank you so much for tuning in, and remember, we are all in this together.